Hi, I'm Christopher Showerman. I am part of the production Day After Day. And if you want to learn more about this great musical that I'm part of, check out this conversation that I had.
Tell us about when you heard about Day After Day, the musical, and why did you want or have to be part of this award-winning musical production?
Well, that's a great question because I first learned about Day After Day 5, maybe 6 years ago now. It was a long time ago. I was doing another show, and the accompanist on that was David Scott Cohen. And David said, "Hey, my wife and my father-in-law have this show about Doris Day, and we think you'd be great as the other person in the show." And I'm like, "Great! I love David, and I love his wife. I met at that point, never met his father-in-law, Tony Santamauro." And so I went over, I met Tony. Of course, he's fantastic, and I enjoyed meeting him. And we went through the script a little bit, and Tony said, "Yeah, that's the guy. He's, feels right, feels good." And then 6 years ago, it just so happened that the producer at the time had found another actor and already made a commitment to another actor for that same role. And and so Tony and David and Christy came back to me and said, "My gosh, we are so sorry, but the role that we said was yours has already been given to somebody else." I said, "That's fine." At the time, it was kind of a blessing because I was super busy anyway. So fast forward to about 6 months ago, I got a call from Christy, Mauro-Cohen, and she said, "Hey, we have an opportunity to put this show up in a month, but our guy who was playing that role has moved now. He's moved to the Bay Area. He's a long ways away, and it's just not economical or feasible for him to play the role. The only way if we could put this show up is if you play the part." And of course, I was flattered, and I would love to do it. I was also in the middle of Tech Week on a big show that I was in at the time. It was The Music Man, and I was like, I can't say no to them because I didn't want the show to not go on, but at the same time, I thought, how can I do this? It's a 2-person show, and I've got 1 month from finding out about it to actually performing it in front of an audience. And it was an immense amount of memorization for me anyway, in that short amount of time. But I just knuckled down, and it's amazing when you decide, okay, I'm going to do this one way or another. And every day I would pound about 8% of the script into my head. That was my quota, that I'd have to memorize, one more page a day. And by the end of it, we put it up, and nobody was the wiser. So it was an amazing experience. So the first time I actually got to perform it was 6 years after I knew about it.
And for those people who don't know what Day After Day is and the story, tell us about what this musical is about.
Well, Day After Day is like a biography musical about the life of Doris Day. And I learned so much working on it. And she's such a fascinating, fantastic character. So we take Doris's life from the time that she got into show business, even a little before she got into show business, and all the crazy things that happened to point her into this career when she was about 13 to 15 and 16. And then we follow her through her life, represented with different movies and songs that she was known for chronologically through her life until about 65.
Tell me about the character of the man, or should I say the many characters you play as the man in the production of Day After Day.
Well, the man, as the character I play is labeled, is basically the narrator for most of it. So I will fill you in on a lot of the details going on in Doris's life at the time, and the surrounding circumstances that created the many magical miracles that kind of fell into place for Doris's career to blossom into one of the most successful careers in entertainment history. And two of the most successful careers, because she had a full-on recording career and a full-on movie career. So I'm the narrator. I slip into a couple of characters that she worked with, like Les Brown of Les Brown and his band of renown, and some other band leaders that she'd worked with throughout that time, as well as some people that she worked with Columbia Records as well.
I want to talk how it's an intimate kind of musical, how they created this version of it.
So Day After Day is a two-person show. And so by definition, it's very intimate because you could put it on in a broom closet. It's so small. You could do it with a piano and room enough on the stage for Deborah, the woman that plays Doris Day, and myself. Deborah is fantastic, by the way, because she plays Doris Day from the age of 16 to the age of 65. And we watch her evolve through these different eras of her life with the help of 16, maybe 17 full-on costume and wig and shoe changes that happen so quickly. It's like magic. So that's the feel of this show. And it's a show that can be performed for 500 people or 5 people in a living room, and the enjoyment's the same.
To add on, just tell us a little more about your co-star and force of nature who is playing Doris Day in Day After Day.
Deborah Robin is a force of nature. It's a great description of her. And I've worked with Deborah quite a bit, especially last year. We did a series of productions together. And then when we got to do Day After Day together, that was just the cherry on top. But she has found these tiny nuances and affectations and mannerisms that Doris had, and she performs them, she puts them into her performance in such a way where it feels natural. It feels like it really is her. It doesn't feel like an affectation or like she's impersonating somebody. It feels like, oh, here's a woman that just acts and sounds and has these mannerisms exactly like Doris Day. When actually Deborah's not exactly like that, but she performs it beautifully.
Tell us a little bit about the director and musical director that has helped you bring this musical to life.
We've gotten so much direction all along musically. David Scott Cohen is our musical director, and David, I've worked with David for over a decade now in different shows, and he is so affable and nurturing and supportive and encouraging to work with. You always feel safe with David, especially out on stage. If something screws up, and it's usually me that's screwing it up, David will just follow it, and it'll make the audience feel as if, oh, that was supposed to happen. It just sounded natural, and it doesn't even sound like, any catastrophe happened. David's always there like a safety net for the performers on stage. So it's wonderful working with David. And then the direction for Day After Day came from Tony Santamauro and his daughter, Christy, Mauro-Cohen. And the two of them have performed this show for years and years. So I think over 30 years. And so they know the show intimately well, and they can not only tell you and help to direct you to get the best out of you, but because they've done the roles themselves, they can give you these personal anecdotes and their experience to why this works better. And because they've test marketed these different choices in front of audiences hundreds of times.
I didn't write this down, but add to it, because you work on Day After Day and also MGM in Concert, both a creation from Tony. Tell me why these musical productions are so unique and why they seem to be always popular when people see them.
Tony really tapped into a zeitgeist with his love of musicals, like true love. And so I think that Tony wrote the shows that he wanted to see. And because of that passion and that love, and watching Tony, I have all of the videos of Tony performing these shows. watching him do them, you really get that sense that this isn't a job for Tony. This is a calling. This is a passion. And because of his love for the material, he can connect with people's excitement, even if they weren't previously a fan of, say, Doris Day, or in the case of MGM, the old classic MGM musicals. People come away from these shows with a new appreciation for them.
Why is theater so unique for both the actor and the audience? And why are musicals even more unique to the theater format and so popular?
Well, theater is a unique art form. I think as audiences, we've gotten much more used to in the past 70 years of entertainment that can be replayed again and again on TV or on a movie screen. And it's much easier to show entertainment that way, because you do it once, you lock it into celluloid, and then you can replay it again and again. So as audiences, we get used to sitting back and just letting the entertainment wash over us. However, live theater, which is of course the older and truer art form, is more two-way. It's a two-way street. So you can't just sit back and be passive, because the people telling the story can see you, and your response to that show is part of the show. So no show is the same, because no audience is the same. We can perform the show the same night after night, but the audience will give us different things, and that informs the people on stage. And believe me, the more that you respond to a show, the better the show you're going to get that night. And so we as the actors and performers on stage thrive on the energy that comes off the audience. And then musicals, to your other half of the question. Musicals are so great because music really speaks to something a little more primal even than language, I think, in us. And I think we hold on to that in a deeper place in our soul, in our psyche. And I think when people literally get the resonance of the music in them, it pulls them along into the feeling of the show. For instance, my mom, who has dementia, and she has a hard time remembering things and remembering ideas. I can sing a little piece of a song, and she can complete the whole rest of the song. So in that sense, music for her, which is just such a great example of how powerful it is, that taps into something that goes beyond her struggling with this dementia, with this memory loss, and it breaks through that. So music is such a powerful medium to tell a story with.
Is there an underlying message for Day After Day?
Yeah, you know what? I think the underlying message, ironically, watching Doris's approach to life, really was que sera, sera. She didn't try to fight it. She didn't try to force things to happen. She wasn't even pursuing stardom or fame. She was just open to the opportunities as they came, and she was authentic as herself. And I think the rest of us can learn a massive lesson from that by not trying to fight destiny, but just take it as it comes and appreciate the moment for what it is, as opposed to wishing or trying to make it something else.
I'm going to add another question. What surprised you about the story? What did you learn about Doris Day that surprised you from this musical?
I think the thing that one of the many things, because a lot of it was new information for me. So spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you one of the things that comes up early in her career. When she was a young girl, she was an avid dancer, and she was going to be Ginger Rogers. She loved watching Ginger Rogers, and she wanted to follow a career in dance, and that's all she was interested in. And she won a dance competition with a young male partner at the age of 13. And the the prize that they won was to get shipped off to California. She grew up in Cincinnati. Get shipped off to California to study with a great Hollywood choreographer. And the night before she was going to leave, just out of nowhere, the car that she was traveling in got struck by a freight train. And she had a double compound fracture, and it literally and figuratively shattered her dreams of being a dancer. And I think the thing that struck me so much about that story is at the outset, we all go, oh my God, what an awful, awful thing to happen to such a young, talented person. But now, with benefit of hindsight, now, 60 years later, we can look back and go, thank God for that freight train. Because without that freight train, there would have been no Doris Day as we know her today.
What do you want the audience to get out of Day After Day, the musical?
I think this usually happens, but what I want the audience to come away from Day After Day with is more of an appreciation and a love of Doris Day and her approach to life, her art, the amazing expanse of her catalog, both in music and movies, and hopefully come away singing a few of the songs.
And the most important question, why must or should the Southern California theater community go see Day After Day, the musical now?
Well, there's never a bad time to go see live theater, and there's certainly never a bad time to go see this particular show because it's such a fun show. But I think it's important now more than ever. Our lives are complicated today. There are so many things that we could focus on that are dark and heavy, and maybe go against our beliefs or the way that we would like to see our world go. And to go into this world that Doris Day lived in, this very wholesome, sweet, kind, beautiful, encouraging world, and to remember that still speaks to most all of us today, is a nice reminder that humanity still exists.
You have worked with P3 Theater before several times. Why do you like working with this unique theater, and why do you think they get musical productions so correct when they produce musicals?
Yeah, I've gotten to work with John Peterson and his company P3 several times. The first time that I got to work with him was on a show called MGM in Concert, and I actually got to work with him as a performer as well as our producer. And I grew to know and really love John in that instance there. We do a lot of stuff together in that show, and it's a fun, interactive, fast-paced show. We go through 75 songs from the MGM musical era in just a couple hours, which is quite a feat. And so John also has this passion for telling stories with music. He loves bringing these special musicals and musicals that you might not get the opportunity to hear every day. For instance, in October, and a fitting month to do this, John produced a concert version of Jekyll and Hyde. And that's a show that's difficult to mount, and therefore it's not done that often. And it was really great to have the opportunity to do that in a concert form with John as well. And also, just a fun little connection thing about John. I personally just got back from a trip to New York. I have a friend who just booked a role in the show Gypsy on Broadway. And so I went for a 48-hour trip to New York to catch a matinee performance of Gypsy on Broadway. And as I'm standing in the lobby, 3,000 miles away from Los Angeles, I hear, "Chris, what are you doing here?" And I look up, it's John Peterson in New York at that same performance. He comes over and gives me a hug. So I feel like John and I are connected on a whole nother level.
What would you tell other actors, playwrights, directors, and other theater creatives why they should get involved with P3 Company and John Peterson?
P3 is a great company to work with because it is for and by performers. So we've all had great experiences and not so great experiences in performing if you do it long enough. And this is a company that really supports the artist and the performer. So you are encouraged to bring yourself and your ideas to their productions. And so as a performer, it's a joy to get to do some of these shows because you're encouraged to, as opposed to, say, in a lot of productions, you're directed, micromanaged within an inch of your life. And with the P3 shows, you're encouraged to bring your personality and bring your thoughts and ideas and really get to express, which is why we all want to do this job in the first place. Also, the two shows that we've mentioned tonight, the MGM show and the Doris Day show, those have been great shows for me because they're not one-offs. They're small enough shows where we can plug them in to many different spaces and venues. So we might do some MGM last month and then do a Doris Day show someplace else next month, and then in another venue do the Doris Day show and then do the MGM somewhere. So it's not a one and done. You can keep coming back to them, and this show is a little different every time that you do it, especially if the venue changes and the shape of the stage changes and the audience changes. So it's really fun to get to experience that in different spaces.
And I always ask this question: is that nonprofits never get enough money, and paying for the tickets don't pay for the whole thing. Why should the local SoCal community and theater fans help support theaters like P3 Company in many ways?
P3 and independent theater in general, one of the challenges is we want to help to nurture the theater going audience and help to cultivate that love of live theater and new theater patrons as well. And when you're competing with other forms of entertainment, like going to, see a movie at the movie theater or going to a sports event, you have to compete with the price point of those tickets as well. And so the trick is to keep the price of the tickets down low enough where people can still go and feel like they can enjoy a night out with their friends or family. But that price point isn't really enough to cover the cost of producing this show unless you've got a very long run in a space that's paid for. So the cost of creating the show and producing the show far outmatches the hopes that we might have of making the money back in ticket sales. So it's always our lifeblood to have angels out there that will donate in kind as well as in money, things that help us to stay alive and to keep the show going.
So my last question is there anything else you want to mention about Day After Day or the creators behind Day After Day?
Day After Day is a really fun ride through a really fascinating life. And the creators and the creator, Tony Santamauro, and his daughter, Christy, who helped to originate and then direct us in the show. They have such a love and such a reverence for not only her life, but that whole time period and the kind of art that was being created in that time. So they have created something very special that will hopefully transport you back to a simpler and warm time in entertainment. Hi, I'm Christopher Showerman, and I hope that you'll come to see me and Deborah Robin in the show Day After Day. It's a story of the life of Doris Day, and I know you're going to come away not only learning a few things about Doris Day's life, but singing a few of her songs on the way home, too. It's a show that will stay with you long after the curtain comes down. I'll see you at the theater.